Top of the show, I talked about Georges St-Pierre. I talked about how big of an honor it was for me to be covering that moment, how great it was to see him go out on top, to do it his way, doing it unlike any other in this game, in this MMA game, where he wins a title and then walks away 26-2. He avenges his only 2 losses. He is the greatest of all time, without a doubt, in my opinion. No black cloud hanging over his record, his legacy, and the man who was by his side for the majority of those 26 victories is our guest at this time. Joining us from La Belle Province, joining us from Montreal, Firas Zahabi, who is gracious enough to come on the show. I text him. I get like one reply per 10 texts these days. He's so busy, but it's great to have him back on the program. Firas, how are you?
Hey, Ariel. Thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure, Firas, and it was great to see you last week in Montreal. So when did you find out that GSP was going to make this announcement, that he officially decided to retire?
It's been a long time coming. He's been on the fence for a while about it, and I've been actually encouraging him to try. I've been trying to convince him to retire. I think when you're on the fence like that for so long, the answer is to hang it up. And a few weeks before he announced his retirement, he told me he had made his decision, and here we are.
He was trying to get that fight against Khabib Nurmagamedov. He said that on Thursday. Were you in favor of him trying to get that fight? Like, if the UFC would have said yes, would you have been in favor of that fight happening?
Yes, if George was going to fight again, I think it would have been great if they did 165, GSP versus Khabib, and that would have been his next fight. Anything other than that, it would have to have been McGregor if McGregor had beaten Khabib, and maybe McGregor steps in at 165, but it was really one of those 2 names. I think after Khabib won against McGregor, his name exploded. Everybody knows who he is right now. He was a great candidate for a fight with George, but unfortunately, it fell through.
Could George have even gone down to 155? Was that a possibility at all?
I think there was a time in his career he could have done it. I wanted him to go down to 155 for 1 or 2 fights years ago when he was champion. I wanted him to try to get that winning 2 categories at once. I had come out publicly about it. I got a lot of blowback from everybody, but years later he had thought about it. He had agreed that he could do it once or twice in his career. But right now, I don't think he has the motivation to do it. These last few years, I think, after he was slowing down his career, I don't think he had the motivation anymore to go down to 155. However, 165, I'm sure that's something he would have done.
And so for you to have him go out like this, in the fight game, so often it gets uncomfortable towards the end of a fighter's career, right? They don't look like themselves. They're getting knocked out. We've seen it time and again in this sport, in boxing, in every combat sport. To have your guy that you've been through so much with by his side go out as a double champion, to go out on this winning streak, that must be, a massive accomplishment and a source of pride for you as well, because this is the blueprint, right? This is how every fighter wants to go out, to actually get it done, to see it happen with him of all people. What does that feel like?
It's amazing. For me, it's a storybook ending. I told him, you just won the middleweight title. It's time to hang it up. You won it in New York. I told him, you're the king of New York. What else do you want? That's it. End it here. Because for me, health is number one. Health is number one. He has a lot of fighting time in the octagon. He's taking a lot of shots. It's just, as you get older, your body starts to break down. He's had 2 ACL injuries. Now he's much healthier than he was when he was fighting every 3-4 months, near the end of his career. His body was really breaking down. And I told him, you cannot, do that for too long. He, in the Guinness Book of World Records, I can't remember which year it was, Georges St-Pierre had the world record for most time in the octagon.
Wow.
I know he's been surpassed since. However, there was a time where nobody had spent more time fighting in the octagon than him. And the body has an expiry date. It has a certain amount of kilometers it can take.
Were you aware how sick he was going into that Bisping fight? And of course, afterwards, he was a lot more public. But did you realize what toll that took on his body, the colitis and just gaining all that weight?
Yeah, the symptoms were manifesting themselves during camp, but we don't like to try to talk too much about injuries and illness when we're in camp, because then you start to focus your mind on that. You start to, when you're in camp, we're like, are you injured or are you hurt? If you're hurt, let's not talk about it. If you're injured, we gotta, call the fight. We gotta call the UFC, tell them the fight is off. If you're hurt, that means we're still taking the fight. We can work around this. I like to distinguish between those 2 things. But if you're hurt, I don't like to talk about it. Hurt and injured is 2 separate things. And George was telling me, he's going to go through with it no matter what. So I didn't want to talk about it too much, even between me and him, because I don't want to focus our mind or energy there. And then after the fight, it was time to take a break and heal. And he did. He's healed from it now. He's a lot better, and health is number one. That's what I always tell the guys.
I remember after he won that fight, he stayed in the octagon a little longer. It seemed like he was really letting it soak in and acknowledge the crowd. Did you think that night that there was a good chance that was the last time that he was going to fight?
Yes, I thought that's why me and him stayed in the octagon quite a while. You're right, and for him, he kept telling me what just happened. I'm like, you just won the middleweight world title. He's like, it can't be, it's not true. And I was like, yes, it is, man. Congratulations, you're the world champion at middleweight. He was like, it was such a great moment for him. He was in a little bit of disbelief that that he's back in the octagon. He hadn't been there in years, and not only did he win the title, he won the middleweight title. It was a very special moment for both our careers, and it's just a storybook ending. I told him, George, this is it, man. This is the final chapter. Hang it up. Let's do it, man. Hang it up.
One thing that I've learned a little later in his career, he's talked about it a lot more now, is just how nervous he would get. And I think it was interesting on Thursday at his press conference, he said that he would dread fight day. He loved the build-up, he loved the training, he loved the camaraderie, but fight day and the fight itself was his least favorite part of the process. I'm sure you've been in the back. Like, how bad was it? How much did he actually hate this? And is it, for me, it's weird for someone to be that successful, but to hate doing what he was so good at, right? Isn't that strange?
You know what? I think it wasn't just the fighting. I think it was the expectations of everybody. Everybody expects George not only to win, but to win every position. Like if GSP gets taken down, it's a big deal. If you're new to the UFC or you're fighting in a regional circuit and you get taken down, nobody's talking about it. But if George makes one mistake or gets hit with a good shot, people are all talking about it. So I think it's also expectations. There's a lot of pressure on him to perform and to have a flawless win or to win every single round. It's just the expectations of everybody. I think that weighs down on him. He wants to live up to the expectations, but anybody who knows sports, even the best of the best can have a bad night. I think that really scares him. And of course, the fear of getting hurt. I think that's on everybody's mind. But George, I would say he's more nervous than most. That's for sure.
When did you first meet George? Do you remember when?
I met George before his first pro fight. So I was training David Loiseau in Montreal in the Tristar gym. George was training in a smaller gym with Christophe Midou. They were kind of like bouncing around different gyms. The most popular fighter and the first fighter from Quebec to go to UFC was David Loiseau. So George came into TriStar wanting to train with David Loiseau and me and the coaching staff we had there, Angelo Xarakos and all the coaches there, because it was the hot spot. It was the first team to go to UFC, and me and him just got along right away. We became training partners. We were training together on a daily basis right away. After his first loss to Matt Serra, after his loss to Matt Serra, he wanted me to take over because we were more like-minded. We were trying to do mixed martial arts, where the other trainers really were trying to impose their style on us. We had a kickboxing coach, a wrestling coach. Everybody wanted us to do their sport, and I think mixed martial arts was a bit. It was new. We didn't know how to put the pieces together. Me and him were more. We wanted to be a more well-rounded system, so he asked me to take over, and since then, we've won every fight together.
Do you recall when you sort of realized how special he could be, that he could be one of the greats of all time? Do you remember, like, was it the first time you saw him? Did a light go off later on? When did that happen for you?
Well, I'll tell you something. After he lost to Matt Serra, a number of people told me don't train him. Like back then, TriStar was very cutthroat. I didn't own TriStar Gym there. When I owned TriStar Gym, I really changed the culture of TriStar. At that time, it was like, hey, it was a very rough place, TriStar. If you came in there and you gloved up, we were there to beat you up. We wanted to knock you down. We wanted to hurt you. It was a very rough place. And people, all the coaches, a lot of the coaches were telling me, don't train George. He's going to get knocked out again. He has no chin. After he lost to Matt Serra, everybody was saying, look, his run is up, man. He got lucky. He got lucky. He beat Matt Hughes. Matt Hughes is not a striker. All these guys are better wrestlers than him. They have powerful punches. And they're going to knock George out over and over again. And I was like, look, it might happen. I didn't know George was going to go on a win streak. I honestly didn't. Hindsight, people think it was obvious. It wasn't. At that time, he was fighting Koscheck next. After his loss to Matt Serra, he was fighting Koscheck. And Koscheck was known as a big puncher who was going to out wrestle George easily. At least that's what everybody, thought. And I was like, look, he's my friend. I'm going to train him either way, win, lose or draw. I'm going to help him. He's my friend. Why wouldn't I help him? And after he beat Koscheck, I was expecting him to beat Koscheck, but I thought it was going to be a really hard fight. Like I didn't know if he would win. And then he was just going after win after win. But the time that he really proved to me that I think he's, because don't forget, the third time he beat Matt Hughes, it was an older, slower Matt Hughes. It was an older. We were very confident for that third fight with Hughes. It's when he beat BJ Penn. When he beat BJ Penn at UFC 94, he beat John Fish. Those were hard fights. Those were fights where, like, if you beat this guy, like, we know, you're one of the greatest pound for pound. And that was always the goal for George. He had high hopes, but early in his career, nobody knew he was going to be so great.
That's wild to me that after he lost to Matt Serra, like the guy is at his lowest, there are people trying to convince you to jump ship, to leave the guy.
Absolutely.
That's what kind of people are these? What kind of teammates, friends
I
are
don't know.
these?
It's a rough business. Let me tell you, it's a tough business. Fighting is a tough business. But the culture of TriStar is very different now. We train every level. If you're the best or you're not the best, we try to, develop your skills. And I find that makes better fighters. That just makes a better place. I enjoy going to the gym even more. But early on in George's career, believe me, there was a lot of doubt. Even George had a lot of doubt. He'll tell you he had a lot of doubt because Matt Serra was supposed to lose, and Matt Serra didn't lose.
Right.
He won quite easily.
Is that one of the things you're most proud of in your career? Because he also talked last week about how embarrassed he was, how down he was after that fight. To build him back up and to never have him lose afterwards, to build up his confidence, to build up his game. Some people said that he changed a bit after the Serra fight, that he took the easy way out. I would argue that he just evolved his game and he figured out how to be a proper fighter and learn from his mistakes. But to build him back up, that must have been a tough thing to do because it sounded like he was truly at rock bottom.
Well, I don't know who would say he took the easy way out. He fought the hardest fights. I mean, he fought and dominated the golden age of the welterweight division. It was the golden age of the welterweight division. At least that's how I see it. I don't see him taking the easy way out. I think he fought smart and avoided going toe to toe. If that's the easy way out, then yes, he definitely, fought smart. He fought intelligent. That's why he lasted so long. And look, I always encourage health first. We want the fights to be action packed. We want wins. We want finishes. But we also have to fight in an intelligent way. Preserving your health is the most important thing. And people are smart. Smart champions last long. Smart champions last long. And George was definitely a smart champion.
What's your favorite GSP moment? In a fight, behind the scenes, a moment you shared privately? Is there when you're 80 years old and you're talking to your grandkids about the great GSP that you once coached, that you traveled the world with, you were by his side, you guys were the best team. What's the moment that defines that time together?
There's too many great moments, but the best moment for us, I think, was UFC 94. I think that's when it was just when we broke out on a world stage. When before UFC 94, the fight versus BJ Penn, we would come home from the US, and not many people would know who we are. We weren't getting real attention here, and at that point, MMA was still being rejected by a lot of the media in Quebec, in Canada, as a rough sport, barbaric sport, violent sport. But after UFC 94, after everybody, saw the prime times and the 24, like the previews that they had up to those fights, we had a camera crew following us for a month out before that fight. The UFC had paid millions of dollars promoting that fight, and it got into everybody's homes, and that's when TriStar GSP exploded. Everybody knew who we were. People started traveling from all over the world to come train at TriStar Gym. That was the time where we got in touch with after that fight with BJ Penn. George can call up any trainer, any training partner. They were all willing to come down and work with us, and it was just such a magical, incredible time for us.
I'm happy you said that because I remember noting a few times that I felt like the Quebec media didn't appreciate GSP, that they had one of their own as the greatest fighter in the world, and that I would go to his fights and it would be like one journalist from Montreal covering this, and I couldn't understand. Like in boxing, you would see tons of people traveling with the French Canadian boxers, and with GSP, it felt like they were really late. Now it seems like they accept him, they give him the props that he is owed, but I think that's a great point on your part. They were a little late to the party. The fans, I don't think were, but the media seemed to be a little late to the party as well. To have him, it sounds to me like he is still at the gym quite often these days, to still have like the great GSP there for your younger fighters. Do you sense, like I asked him on Thursday, what's his now, like what are the things he's most proud of? And he says that sometimes he'll see a fighter doing something wrong on the bag, and he'll go up to him and he'll see their eyes just kind of explode and they can't believe that GSP is talking to them. Do you see that? Like what not just him being there, the presence, the impact that he has, how important is that for you as the head coach over there?
Well, he retired on Thursday, and Friday morning he was there for practice.
No way. Really?
Yeah. He just taught class today. I just came back from one of his classes.
That's
We
incredible.
wrestled, we did jiu-jitsu, we put in a bunch of rounds. He loves martial arts. George is not only a phenomenal champion, he's a phenomenal human being. He's a great champion. He's an even greater human being. And like you said, he likes to help the youth. He likes to help people that are on that path, that journey. He's just a really, really good person. And that's why, honestly, I enjoyed working with him for so many years. Not only all those big wins, not only was he a hardworking person, but really, honestly, he showed a great example of what it's like to be a good person.
Are you the type to smell the roses? In other words, now that it's over, are you thinking to yourself like, man, I should have appreciated that more? I'm kind of sad I won't get one more journey with him. Are you fully at peace with this as well?
I am. I'm really happy with this. And like I said, I encouraged him. He was on the fence about it. He asked me what my vote is, and I told him, look, there's nothing left for you. Unless it's a mega fight with Khabib, there's really nothing left. And I didn't think that Khabib. I don't know what's going on in the behind doors with the business side. I don't do any of that. I'm too busy on the mat. But it seems like I understand there's a lot of superstars, and it's hard to get everybody to agree on one date, one time, one price, one weight. I'm sure it's a very complicated thing to do. I'm sure Dana White has his hands full. I'm sure UFC. I'm sure they tried every which way. I'm sure that they made a decision that made sense for them and their company. But at the end of the day, if it wasn't a Khabib fight, I don't see any other fight. So I just told him it's time to hang it up. And yes, I'm at peace with that. I'm really happy with his career. I like to look forward. We're going to have a lot of projects together. I'm sure me and George are going to be training a lot of different fighters together. We're going to be working. We're going to be going on more adventures. Not George in the octagon, not George himself in the octagon, but I'm sure there's plenty of adventures to come.
You know how it is in the fight game. People retire, they come back. Do you think 100% he's done?
I believe there's a fire in George. I believe that one day there's going to be an incredible opportunity for a fight, and he might come back. Yes, that's always a possibility. Why? I can imagine if Ben Askren went on a tear and nobody can beat him. I think if the UFC calls George, hey, could you come and fight this guy? It would have to be something like that, and he's good enough to do it. There's other names out there that can build themselves to a super megastar status and entice George to come back. Because the truth of the matter is, I don't think George wants to win a belt, defend it every 3-4 months, protect it, and go back to what he used to do. I think those days are done. That would take too much out of his life. But to come in for a mega fight years down the line, or whenever, I think that would be tempting to George. He might say no, and he might feel no, and he might be like, "That's it, I'm hanging it up." But George is a really competitive guy. You guys have gotten to know George over the years. If there's a unjumpable hurdle, he'll want to try to jump it. That's just the kind of guy he is. He's very competitive, incredibly competitive person.
So it sounds like you've left the door open a little bit here. So in your mind, there's still maybe a little like you don't think it's 100% done.
I don't want to speak for George. This is just me observing George for so many years, and I just think that deep down inside, he's so competitive, and it would have to be a super hard challenge.
Okay.
It would have to be somebody of an Anderson Silva like status. It would have to be somebody like that. That's what he would come back for.
Okay. By the way, one last quick thing before I let you go. How is Rory? Speaking of kind of picking yourself up after what happened against Gegard Mousasi, mentally, spiritually, how is he as he's trying to get back on the horse here against a guy that John Fitch?
Yes, of course. He's back in training, and we're trying to correct what happened in the last fight for sure. The last time it didn't go well. He got his nose injured in round one, so it was a tough fight for him to get around. We're making sure that the next time we go in there, it's not going to happen again, and we're getting ready. We're getting ready for that fight.
He told me that he felt off the entire time. In the locker room, he felt off. He felt like he didn't want to be there. Is that alarming for you to hear as a coach?
Of course, we got to make sure, we got to find out why. Why are you not feeling like you want to be in there? And we got to make sure that the next fight, he has to want to be there. We have to get the job done, and he has to defend his title. And believe me, we're working hard towards that fight.
All right. For us, congratulations.
What a run for you guys. Amazing to see two Montrealers do what you did on the biggest stage possible. And so cool to see him go out like that. Like to have a press conference, to do it his way. These things don't happen in MMA. Like you're usually pushed out, kicking and screaming. Just perfect. Everything was just perfect last week. And it was cool to see you there. So again, congrats. Thanks for doing this. And continued success to you and the team over at Tristar.